John Brown. A very simple name, a very plain name, but the reactions are never plain and simple. People react to John Brown in very extreme measures. And the principal reason for that is because John Brown affected the United States in an emotional way because the issue was the very hotly debated issue of slavery. Brown was an abolitionist. He was born in Connecticut. He had hated slavery his entire life. He believed that God had called him to bring an end to slavery and that God had chosen him to do so.
Growing up in Idaho, I didn't know anything about John Brown prior to living on his farm. Whether you're pro or anti-John Brown, he absolutely captures people. Probably 500 to 1,000 people come through every summer just to pay tribute to John Brown and his family. This is the highest point of our property, and that's why I buried them up here. Frederick died first. He died at 4 years old in 1831, and then Diantha died the following year during childbirth, and she has a newborn baby in her arms, little boy.
So Brown came up with a plan. First, he fought against the extension of slavery in the territories, places like Kansas. But that wasn't enough for John Brown. He felt that a much more violent strike was necessary against slavery, and he chose Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley, between the confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers, as his first place to strike, where he would launch his war against slavery.
Brown's raiders quickly found themselves stranded. They expected slaves from surrounding farms to flock to the scene and join them in a flight to the mountains. Instead, Brown's men ended up shooting a free black man, a baggage porter, who wondered why the train into town had stopped on the tracks. In short order, a handful of men with a dozen hostages faced an arriving army.
Now that he's surrounded, now that he's trapped, United States Marines are called in from Washington. They will be commanded by a man that never was a Marine, but happened to be at his home, Arlington House, just outside the Capitol, Robert E. Lee. Sunday morning, October the 18th, the raid is only 36 hours old. Lee will attempt to negotiate with Brown. Brown has hostages. Brown intends to use the hostages to gain his freedom and release from Harper's Ferry. Lee will have none of it. And so just about dawn on the 18th, the signal to attack is given. The Marines charge the fort, the fire engine house of the U.S. Army, where Brown is held up. And in only 3 minutes, Brown will be captured, his men either captured or killed, and all of the hostages freed.
He was considered basically a criminal for what he had done.
What do you say about him now?
I think it depends upon who you ask. Certainly some people, when he died as a martyr. There were people in the North who held him up as the example of what people should do to get rid of slavery. There's certainly people who honor him for what he did because he wanted to abolish slavery. But there are still some people, too, who feel that, he was a fanatic. And what he did, he certainly crossed the boundaries of what we would consider law of the day to capture, to get to his aims, to try to achieve his aim, which was to free slaves.
If they put you on the jury back then.
Oh. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
This is one of the pikes that John Brown had shipped to Harper's Ferry. He had slightly over 900 of them made, and they were assembled by his men as they began to collect here at Harper's Ferry in the summer of 1859. The pikes were designed to be used by the freed slaves that Brown anticipated joining his band. He knew that they wouldn't be able to fire guns, and until they could be trained to do that, he intended to arm them with these pikes. This pike was given to a local family by Edwin Ruffin. Ruffin had secured several of them and sent one to a number of southern governors with an inscription indicating that this is what was in store for the South from northern abolitionists.
This sign was erected in 1932 by the Historical Society to commemorate the site of John Brown's hanging. At that time, this was a site just a little ways out of town on a farm. They needed a large space because over 1,000 soldiers were in attendance, in addition to many civilians, to witness the hanging of John Brown.
I think that if he hadn't been at that time in place, that eventually there would have been somebody. But I think that he played a huge part in history, and it was a very important part of history that he played.
Do you know precisely where it was on this spot that he was hanged?
It was over there in that part of the side yard. There was a scaffolding built, and I think that there were several others that were hung at the same time.
If you want to believe that he was mad, I'm not going to change your mind. I personally believe that he was chosen to do this great work, as did his family believe he was chosen. He was chosen in 1836, and you know, he went on to do great things. He did exactly what he was instructed by a much higher power than you or I.
Well, he was a good man. He meant well. I think he just got a little too radical in what he was doing. So that's all I guess best I can say.
When you say your aunt gets mad at you, what does your aunt say?
Well, she doesn't get mad, but she says, Jeffrey, he started the Civil War.